Someone's wedding is being ruined right now, not by rain, not by a vendor no-show, by a guest who decided their feelings outranked the entire event. Here are 71 real complaints that actually happened. 1. The invitation said black tie optional, and somewhere between the mailbox and the mirror, a guest decided that 2 words on a card were a personal declaration of war against their wardrobe. They mobilized the family group chat, drafted their grievances, and arrived with the energy of someone who had been wronged at a constitutional level. Here's what they somehow missed. Black tie optional is a standardized hospitality industry phrase that has existed since the mid-20th century. It means formal attire is welcomed and a dark suit is perfectly acceptable. The word optional is doing enormous work in that phrase. It is the most accommodating version of a formal dress code that exists. Etiquette historians will tell you that dress codes on invitations were invented as a courtesy to guests, specifically so nobody would show up underdressed and feel embarrassed. The entire system was built for the guest's benefit and then weaponized against the couple by the very person it was designed to protect. Beyond the semantics, venue contracts frequently include aesthetic clauses. A couple specifying formal attire is often partially fulfilling a contractual obligation to the venue, not issuing a personal fashion decree aimed at your specific closet. Wedding photographers spend weeks building a visual color palette for an event. One guest in cargo shorts and a novelty t-shirt creates an editing problem nobody budgeted for. The dress code is logistics. It is not a personality critique. It is not commentary on your value as a human. It is the sentence on a card that told you exactly what to wear in the least demanding way possible months in advance. Treating a dress code like a personal vendetta is like calling the highway speed limit a targeted attack on your driving personality. 2. At some point during the engagement, a guest announced loudly and repeatedly that the chosen wedding date conflicted with their standing plans and that the couple, had they been considerate adults, would have consulted everyone first before booking the most significant event of their lives. This is the scheduling equivalent of believing the sun rises and sets according to your calendar. Wedding date selection is one of the most logistically brutal decisions a couple makes, and it has nothing to do with your Thursday night routine. Popular wedding venues in mid-sized American cities book 12 to 18 months in advance. Couples are not browsing a casual menu of available Saturdays. They are taking the first date that aligns across a photographer, a caterer, a florist, an officiant, and a venue simultaneously, a window that can be extraordinarily narrow. The average wedding coordinates a minimum of 7 to 12 vendors, each with completely independent availability calendars. Finding a single date where all of them align is a statistical achievement, not a planning preference. And here's the part that will really reframe things for you. No date exists that works for everyone. Every family has members in different time zones, different industries, different life stages. A couple who polled their entire guest list for date availability would receive 150 different answers, none of which would converge. The Save the Date system, which wedding culture introduced specifically to give guests maximum lead time, exists precisely because couples know their chosen date will conflict with someone. The tool is already in place. It was used. You received it. Expecting a couple to find a wedding date that works for every guest is like expecting a restaurant to open only on evenings when every person in the city is simultaneously hungry. 3. By the time a certain guest finished their cocktail hour report on the injustice of being seated at table 11, they had informed 4 strangers, 2 cousins, and a passing server that their placement was a deliberate social demotion. The table number had become a verdict. The seating chart had become a ranking system. And none of that is how any of this works. Seating charts for large events are logistical engineering projects. Professional event planners use seating software that groups guests by relationship clusters, mobility needs, dietary restrictions, conversational compatibility, and proximity to kitchen service routes. Importance is not a variable in the algorithm. It is not a field in the software. Nobody typed in, "How much does this person matter?" and assigned table numbers accordingly. What actually determines your seat is whether you know the people next to you, whether you need to be near a door, whether your dietary requirements place you closer to where the kitchen exits, and whether the last-minute RSVP shuffle left a gap that needed filling. Tables at the back of a reception venue are frequently quieter, better positioned near the bar, and preferred by guests who want to have actual conversations rather than shout over the speaker system near the front. The Emily Post Institute, which has been arbitrating social correctness since before most of your family drama existed, explicitly states that no guest table at a wedding carries social rank beyond the head table. All guest tables are considered equal in formal etiquette standing. The seating chart goes through 4 to 7 complete revisions as RSVPs shift and collapse. The position you ended up in may have nothing to do with the original plan at all. Treating your table number as a social verdict is like assuming the number on your hospital room means that doctors like you less. 4. A guest RSVP'd for 2 people when the invitation was addressed to 1. Upon being corrected, they declare the couple cheap, cold, and socially illiterate for failing to include a seat for their companion of 3 weeks, whom they had described, in their words, as basically serious. There are several problems here, and the smallest one is the math. The average per guest cost at an American wedding in recent years falls somewhere between $85 and $290, depending on region, venue type, and catering format. A single unrequested +1 is not a rounding error. It is a real, significant, unbudgeted expense that the couple did not agree to and was not informed about. Venue fire codes set hard capacity ceilings. Couples are legally prohibited from exceeding them regardless of social pressure, which means every seat is a finite and regulated resource, not an expandable courtesy. Traditional etiquette guidelines are specific about when +1s are extended to guests in established long-term relationships, cohabitating partners, and legal spouses. Not to all single guests universally. Not to whoever someone happens to be seeing when the invitation arrives. The invitation envelope address is the industry standard communication tool for who is invited. A single name on the envelope has meant a single invitation since formal invitation conventions were established, and there is no ambiguity in that system for anyone familiar with how invitations work. Wedding planners report that unauthorized +1 additions are among the leading causes of overcapacity incidents and catering shortfalls on wedding days. The guest list you see at a reception is the result of months of agonizing negotiation involving both families and real financial trade-offs. Demanding a +1 you were not offered is like walking into a sold-out concert with a friend and expecting the venue to find a second seat because you showed up together. 5-6 weeks before the wedding, a guest quietly adopted a new eating philosophy. By the time they arrived at the reception, they had determined that the menu did not align with their current relationship with food and wanted the couple to know this. The couple, who had signed a catering contract approximately 11 months earlier, was made aware of the misalignment during cocktail hour. Catering contracts for large events are typically signed 6 to 12 months before the wedding date. They lock in menu items, quantities, and pricing. Post-contract modifications trigger fees that can be significant. The wedding industry makes a clear and reasonable distinction between medically necessary dietary restrictions, meaning allergies, celiac disease, and religious dietary law, and lifestyle preferences adopted after the RSVP deadline. The former is accommodated. The latter is not a contractual obligation because it cannot be. Couples spend 4 to 8 hours in catering tastings, selecting a menu that satisfies both families, the venue's kitchen capabilities, cultural expectations, and their budget. That process was completed long before your dietary evolution began. Professional caterers for large events operate on pre-portioned quantities based on confirmed headcounts. Adding a personalized dish for a single guest mid-service is logistically equivalent to asking a commercial airline to cook a custom meal at cruising altitude. The RSVP card with the meal selection option is the couple's formal mechanism for capturing dietary needs. A guest who did not communicate a restriction at RSVP already had their window and did not use it. Complaining that a wedding menu does not match your newest dietary phase is like ordering from a restaurant, changing your mind after the kitchen starts cooking, and blaming the chef for the original order. 6:11 minutes into the ceremony, a guest checked their watch with the studied casualness of someone who wanted to be seen checking their watch. By the time their recessional played, they had filed a full internal report on the runtime and were ready to share findings at the earliest available opportunity. Ceremony length is determined by the officiant, the faith tradition, the legal minimum content, and the couple's personal choices. Audience entertainment metrics are not part of that equation and never have been. Religious ceremonies in Catholic, Jewish, Orthodox, and many Protestant traditions carry minimum required liturgical content that cannot be abbreviated without canonical violation. This is not a preference. It is a doctrinal requirement that exists entirely outside of the couple's authority to modify. Civil ceremony legal minimums vary by jurisdiction, but require specific declarations, witness affirmations, and legal language that cannot be edited for time. The average American non-religious wedding ceremony runs 20 to 30 minutes. Religious ceremonies average 45 to 90 minutes. These are publicly documented, widely understood norms that any adult who has attended a wedding before can reasonably anticipate. Couples who hire professional officiants discuss and approve ceremony scripts weeks in advance. The runtime is a deliberate and informed choice, not an oversight that slipped through. Wedding photographers and videographers build their entire shooting timeline around ceremony length. A couple who shortened their ceremony to accommodate a guest's attention span would create cascading logistical failures across every vendor's schedule for the rest of the day. Research on wedding guest satisfaction shows that the most common ceremony complaint is actually poor audiovisual clarity, meaning guests cannot hear or see what is happening, not that they are bored. The guest who is bored is in a significant minority. Complaining that a wedding ceremony is too long is like sitting down at a symphony and asking them to skip to the good part. 7, an outdoor summer wedding, was held outdoors in summer, and a guest, upon experiencing the ambient temperature consistent with the season and the biome, determined that the couple had committed a planning failure of historic proportions by not warning anyone that outside would be warm. The outdoor venue was named after the garden it contained. The invitation listed its address. The word garden appeared in the venue name. The outdoor nature of the event was not a hidden variable released at the door. It was the first word of the venue's name, available on every piece of wedding communication, discoverable in under 30 seconds on any internet-enabled device. Weather at outdoor events is legally and practically classified as an act of nature. No vendor contract holds a couple liable for ambient temperature. No reasonable guest expectation includes climate control in an open-air setting, because that is a structural impossibility and not a hospitality standard. Couples hosting outdoor summer weddings routinely provide paper fans, water stations, parasols, and shade structures. These are genuine investments of time, money, and forethought that represent real consideration for guest comfort. The National Weather Service provides freely accessible forecasts. Any adult capable of attending an event is equally capable of checking the predicted temperature and dressing accordingly, which is a preparation task that requires a phone and approximately 45 seconds. Professional event planners note that guest comfort amenity provision at outdoor weddings has increased significantly over the past decade. The infrastructure exists, the resources are offered, the weather is disclosed. Being surprised it is warm at an outdoor summer ceremony is like booking a beach vacation and filing a complaint that the ocean was wet when you arrived. 8. At precisely the contracted closing time, a guest approached the bar with the confidence of someone who had not read a contract in their life and requested a personal extension. When the bartender declined, the guest escalated to the couple. The couple was mid-first dance. Bar service at events is governed by venue liquor licenses, state alcohol service law, contracted bar hours, and liability insurance. Guest preference is not a governing variable in any of those categories. Venue liquor licenses are issued by state and municipal authorities with specific permitted service hours. Serving alcohol beyond license hours exposes venues to license revocation and significant financial and legal penalty. That is the venue's entire operating future on the line, and it is not negotiable because a guest would like one more round. Wedding bar packages are contracted at a flat hourly rate covering specific service hours. Extending bar service mid-event triggers overtime fees that can range from hundreds to thousands of dollars, money the couple does not have available at that moment because they are currently dancing. Dram shop liability laws in most states hold both the venue and the event hosts legally responsible for alcohol-related incidents following the event. Early bar closure is frequently a liability management decision made to protect the couple, the venue, and every guest in the room. The couple paid for bar service hours up front during planning. A guest demanding an extension is asking the couple to spend additional unbudgeted money in real time at their own wedding while they are dancing their first dance. Professional bartenders at events are trained and legally required to stop service at contracted times. They are following the law, not being personally unhelpful. Demanding the bar stay open past closing at a wedding is like staying past checkout at a hotel and asking the front desk to retroactively extend your reservation from the lobby. 9. After the ceremony, a guest circulated through the reception to inform anyone within range that the couple's self-written vows had been too emotional, too specific, and too personal, which is a criticism so perfectly backwards, it deserves its own category. The vows were personal. That was the design. That was the entire point. Self-written vows have been a documented feature of Western weddings since at least the 1960s and are now a mainstream practice encouraged by the majority of secular officiants working today. They are not a trend. They are not an overshare. They are the mechanism by which two specific people tell each other, in their own words, what they are actually promising. Survey data from major wedding planning platforms consistently shows that personalized vows rank among the top 3 most emotionally memorable moments guests cite in post-wedding feedback. The feedback is positive. The guest filing the complaint is statistically outnumbered. Traditional vows are themselves a relatively recent standardization. The Church of England's Book of Common Prayer vows, which people treat as timeless originals handed down from some ancient authority, were formalized in 1549 and have been modified multiple times since. The traditional vow is a revision of a revision. The ceremony exists to formalize a commitment between two specific people. Its purpose is not to manage a guest's comfort level with witnessed human emotion. Officiants who guide couples through the vow writing process report that it takes weeks and represents some of the most deliberate communication couples engage in before marriage. A guest who finds vows too personal is a guest who forgot they were attending someone else's wedding. Complaining that wedding vows were too personal is like attending someone's birthday speech and being annoyed they talked too much about themselves. 10. A guest spent a measurable portion of the cocktail hour and a portion of the dinner hour monitoring the wedding photographer's movements and filing ongoing complaint reports about obstruction, disruption, and the general inconvenience of a professional doing the job they were hired to do. The wedding photographer is one of the highest paid vendors at the event. In the United States, professional wedding photography packages average between $2,500 and $6,000. The couple invested that money specifically because the photographs are the only permanent artifact of the day. Everything else ends. The photos do not. Professional wedding photographers work from a shot list developed with the couple across multiple pre-event planning sessions. Their positioning at any given moment corresponds to a specific pre-planned image. When a photographer moves toward the altar, they are not freelancing. They are executing a plan the couple approved weeks ago. Venues that host weddings routinely brief photographers on approved zones during the ceremony. A photographer positioned near the altar is operating within venue-approved boundaries, not inventing their own. The unplugged ceremony trend, where couples ask guests to put away personal devices, was created specifically because guests attempting their own photography routinely walk into established professional shots and appear in the hundreds of images the couple paid to have clear. Photography lighting requires specific angles relative to window light, artificial sources, and subject position. A photographer who appears to be in the way is frequently managing a 12-second window of optimal light that will not exist again. Guest interference with wedding photographers is a documented professional hazard. The Professional Photographers of America lists guest obstruction among the most common challenges in wedding coverage. Complaining the wedding photographer is in the way at a wedding is like complaining a surgeon is using too many tools during your operation. 11. Upon receiving an adults-only invitation, a guest immediately declared the couple anti-family, spent the pre-ceremony period explaining their objection to other guests, and delivered a retrospective verdict that the decision reflected poorly on the couple's values. Child-free wedding policies are a legitimate, widely practiced, and etiquette-endorsed choice. Every major authority on the subject endorses them without qualification. Let us start with money, because money is where this conversation always ends up eventually. Per head catering costs are real. A couple with 30 children in their extended family is looking at a potential $3,000 to $9,000 addition to their catering bill for guests who will eat a fraction of the food and require supervision the couple cannot provide. Venue. Fire codes apply to every body in the room, regardless of age. Child attendance directly reduces adult guest capacity in a fixed space. These are not preferences, they are arithmetic and fire law. Beyond the budget, many venues with bars, dancing, or late-night programming actively discourage or contractually prohibit children after specific hours for liability and licensing reasons. The couple may not have had a choice even if they wanted one. Survey data shows that parents are frequently relieved to attend a child-free event. The freedom to eat a complete meal, hold an uninterrupted conversation, and enjoy an evening without managing small people is consistently rated as a positive experience by parents who get it rarely. The adults-only invitation format has formal etiquette protocols that predate this couple's wedding by generations. The envelope is addressed only to named adults. No child's Nochi's name appears anywhere on the invitation. The communication is unambiguous to anyone familiar with invitation conventions, which anyone who has attended a formal event before should be. Treating a child-free wedding as an attack on parenthood is like taking offense at a 21 and over event for not catering to your 8-year-old. 12. During the reception, a guest made circuits of the room to inform other guests that the playlist was not what weddings are supposed to sound like. They did not have a citation for this standard. They did not produce the document that specifies what weddings are supposed to sound like, because no such document exists, because there is no such standard, because wedding music selection belongs entirely to the couple and always has. There is no etiquette standard, legal requirement, or industry norm that dictates specific genres, songs, or styles for wedding music. The choice is personal. Wedding DJs and bands are hired specifically to execute the couple's musical vision. They work from curated do play and do not play lists developed across pre-event consultations with the couple. The music you heard at that reception was selected deliberately, approved by the people getting married, and executed by a professional who was paid to deliver it. Music psychology research shows that guests report higher emotional engagement at weddings featuring music that is personally meaningful to the couple compared to generic playlist events. Authenticity is felt in a room. People respond to it even when they cannot name it. The historical precedent for wedding music spans classical composition, folk tradition, jazz, gospel, rock, hip-hop, and every genre that has existed since humans decided to celebrate commitment with sound. No single genre has ever held a monopoly on the form. Weddings featuring unexpected or non-traditional music choices consistently generate the most distinctive and memorable guest experiences. Non-standard playlists are a differentiator, not a failure. The couple's first dance song was selected because it means something specific to them, something that exists in a shared history you are not part of. Policing someone's wedding playlist is like walking into their home and rearranging their bookshelves because you don't like their taste in literature. 13. A guest examined their wedding favor, performed a rapid retail value assessment, announced their results to the table, and left the favor behind as a public statement of dissatisfaction. The favor was, by most accounts, a thoughtful small item the couple had selected, packaged, and placed at every seat. Here is the part that reframes the whole situation. Wedding favors are optional, completely, entirely, etiquette officially optional. No rule requires them. No etiquette authority mandates them. They are a gesture. The average cost of providing wedding favors for 150 guests runs between $450 and $1,500 depending on the item. That is money many couples redirect toward better food, a longer bar service, or a stronger band, all of which improve guest experience more measurably than a small packaged item that venue staff report is left behind in significant numbers regardless of quality or price. The tradition of wedding favors originates in European aristocratic custom, specifically the practice of distributing sugared almonds as symbols of prosperity at noble weddings. The modern retail valued favor is a 20th century commercial evolution, not a sacred tradition with ancient authority. Consumer research on wedding favors shows that perceived thoughtfulness outperforms perceived cost and retention rates. Edible, locally sourced, and personalized items are kept at higher rates than decorative objects, suggesting guests do not actually value price, they value meaning. Couples who eliminate favors entirely and make charitable donations in guests' honor receive consistently positive post-wedding feedback. The favor was a gift, a free gift, given to you at an event you attended for free. Criticizing a wedding favor is like receiving a complimentary item and complaining it wasn't more expensive. 3 weeks after the wedding, a guest began making calls to inquire about the status of their thank you note, 3 weeks. The couple had, in that same 3-week window, returned from a honeymoon, resumed full-time employment, processed the legal name change paperwork specific to their jurisdiction, reconciled their gift list against what was actually received, and begun the process of handwriting individual cards for what was likely 150 to 300 people, the universally accepted thank you note window as established by every major etiquette. Authority, including Emily Post and Amy Vanderbilt, is 3 months post-wedding, not 3 weeks, 3 months. This is not an obscure piece of trivia. It is the published formal standard of the authorities that etiquette-citing guests routinely invoke in other arguments. The standard was 3 months before this couple got engaged, and it is 3 months now. Handwriting individual thank you cards for a large wedding is a multi-week project managed alongside full-time professional responsibilities and post-wedding administrative tasks that most people do not think about. Name change paperwork alone involves the Social Security Administration, the Department of Motor Vehicles, financial institutions, employers, and various government agencies. Gift tracking for thank you purposes begins before the wedding through registry software, but requires post-event reconciliation with what was actually received, some of which arrives weeks after the event from guests who mailed their gifts. In the pre-digital era, the acceptable thank you note window was 1 year. The modern 3-month standard is actually a dramatic tightening of historical expectations. Calling to check on your thank you card 3 weeks after a wedding is like texting someone an hour after a job interview to ask if you got the position. 15, a guest reviewed the couple's wedding registry, determined that the price points reflected an inflated sense of self-importance, and delivered this assessment publicly and with some frequency. The registry existed, as all registries exist, to help guests, to specifically and directly serve the guest who's trying to buy a gift without having to guess. The wedding registry system was developed in the 1920s as a consumer service. It was initiated by department stores, not by couples, as a tool to help guests navigate gift selection without uncertainty. The registry is a courtesy extended to you. It is a wish list, not an invoice. Every major etiquette authority states explicitly that guests are free to purchase any item at any price point on the registry, shop off registry entirely, or give cash or a card. The price range of the registry does not determine the price of your gift. You select what you are comfortable giving. Couples are explicitly advised by registry platforms and etiquette guides to include items across a wide range of price points, precisely to give guests options at every budget level. A registry with no affordable items is the exception, not the norm. Registry data from major platforms shows the most purchased items consistently cluster in the mid-price tier, demonstrating that guests naturally self-select the price they are comfortable with regardless of what else appears on the list. Off-registry gifts, purchased entirely based on the guest's own preference rather than the couple's request, are returned at significantly higher rates than registry items. The registry exists to prevent you from buying something they already have or don't need. Criticizing someone's registry for being too expensive is like complaining about a restaurant menu because you can see dishes you can't afford while ignoring the ones you can. 16. A guest timed the best man speech. They used their phone, confirmed the runtime, and spent the next hour suggesting to neighboring tables that the couple had mismanaged the evening's programming by failing to enforce time limits. The best man had spoken from a place of genuine feeling about a friendship that likely spans years. The guest had a stopwatch. The two of them were not having the same experience of the same moment. Wedding speech timing guidelines suggest 3 to 5 minutes as a general target, and most professional planners share this with speakers in advance. The couple almost certainly did, but there is no enforcement mechanism available to a couple short of physically removing a microphone from a person they care about in front of everyone they know. That is not a real option. It is a social impossibility. Best man and maid of honor speeches are among the most emotionally significant moments of a reception. The speaker was chosen specifically because of their relationship to the couple. What they deliver represents genuine, deeply felt sentiment about people they love. Guest surveys consistently rank toasts and speeches among the most memorable and emotionally resonant reception elements alongside the first dance and cake cutting. The complaint about speech length represents a minority response to a majority positive element. The historical tradition of wedding toasting extends to ancient Greek symposium culture and Roman marriage ceremonies. The toast is one of the oldest wedding rituals still practiced, and its emotional function is not reducible to an entertainment time slot. Negative speech length comments in post-wedding guest feedback are statistically outnumbered by comments about the speech being touching, funny, or meaningful. Timing a wedding speech and filing a complaint about it is like attending a friend's graduation ceremony and writing a review about how long the dean talked. 17. A guest arrived at a venue and discovered that parking required a walk of approximately 200 yards. This information consumed their entire cocktail hour, re-emerged at dinner, and was still being processed audibly during the cake cutting. 200 yards. That is 2 city blocks. The venue's parking infrastructure is a fixed physical attribute of a property that was selected months before the wedding based on date availability, guest capacity, catering capabilities, aesthetic vision, and budget. Parking lot square footage was one consideration among many and was not the determining factor because it rarely is. Couples who rent a venue gain access to the property as it exists. They do not receive parking lot engineering authority. Modifications to parking infrastructure are a capital expense belonging to the venue, entirely outside the couple's control or financial reach. Many of the most sought-after wedding venues, meaning historic estates, urban rooftops, garden properties, and downtown buildings, are precisely the venues with limited or no dedicated parking. That is a feature of their character, not a flaw in the couple's planning. Shuttle service from remote parking is one of the most common guest convenience provisions at weddings. Couples who provide shuttles frequently receive no acknowledgement of the service and complaints about the parking situation anyway. The Americans with Disabilities Act governs disability access parking at commercial events. The couple cannot override or improve on the venue's ADA compliance. It is enforced at the venue level by law. Urban transportation data consistently shows that the majority of wedding guests arrive by rideshare or carpool rather than individual vehicle. Parking complaints most frequently come from guests who declined offered alternatives. Complaining about a wedding venue's parking is like criticizing a restaurant's street for not having enough spaces. It was there before the reservation, and nobody hired you to redesign it. 18. A guest reviewed the centerpieces with the focused energy of someone who had been commissioned to do so, compared them against unspecified internal benchmarks developed over years of wedding attendance, and shared their analysis with the surrounding tables in a tone typically reserved for product safety announcements. The centerpieces did not meet the standard. The standard, as far as anyone could determine, existed exclusively inside the guest's head. floral centerpiece design is one of the largest discretionary line items in a wedding budget. The average couple spends between $2,000 and $10,000 on flowers total, with centerpieces comprising the majority of that figure. This is not a casual purchase. It is a significant investment made after multiple consultation meetings with a professional floral designer, sample arrangement reviews, and final approval from the couple. The elements guests most frequently criticize, meaning single variety arrangements, greenery forward designs, and non-traditional vessels, are consistently cited by design publications as current industry trends. The guest's reference point is the last wedding they attended, which may be a decade old. The couple's reference point is a professional designer working in the current aesthetic landscape. Floral design trends shift annually and move away from what was popular in previous wedding cycles by design. Non-floral centerpieces, including candles, lanterns, photo arrangements, and terrariums, have grown significantly in popularity as deliberate departures from traditional floral centerpiece expectations. This is a design movement, not a budget failure. The couple has already paid for and approved the centerpieces before the guest arrives. The aesthetic choice is complete, contracted, and delivered. Feedback at that stage changes nothing and serves no one. Critiquing wedding centerpieces to the surrounding tables is like reviewing the wallpaper at a dinner party hosted by someone who has already moved out. 19. A guest who drove 45 minutes to a venue spent the entire reception ensuring that everyone within conversational range understood the sacrifice involved in that drive, treating the distance as a hardship requiring public recognition and, at minimum, a formal acknowledgement from the couple. The Save the Date card, which is among the first formal communications a couple sends, includes the venue location specifically to allow guests to assess travel requirements and plan accordingly. The location was not a surprise revealed at the door. It was disclosed months before the event in writing, with enough lead time to make arrangements. Many couples choose venues with deep personal significance. The town where they met, the region where family has lived for generations, the property tied to a long shared history. The location carries meaning that a guest complaining about their commute cannot access from the outside. Venue options are also constrained by availability, cost, and capacity. A couple's preferred local venue may have been booked solid, necessitating a location that is not equidistant from everyone's front door because no location ever is. Transportation accommodation is a standard provision at weddings involving travel. Hotel room blocks, shuttle services, and carpool coordination are all tools couples use to reduce the burden on guests who come from a distance. Couples who provide these options are already addressing the distance concern proactively before the complaint is filed. The guest who attended voluntarily accepted the invitation knowing the venue location. That acceptance happened at the RSVP stage, which is the moment designed for exactly this kind of consideration. Nobody submitted the RSVP under duress. The 45-minute drive was fully disclosed, agreed to, and completed without incident. Complaining about a wedding venue's distance after RSVPing yes is like agreeing to hike a trail, showing up at the trailhead, and then complaining about the elevation. 20. A guest who attended an event entirely at the couple's expense, consuming food they did not cook, drinking from a bar they did not fund, and dancing to music they did not select or pay for, spent a portion of the evening delivering an unsolicited audit of the couple's spending decisions with the confidence of a licensed financial advisor and the jurisdiction of someone who contributed exactly nothing to the budget. The average American wedding costs approximately $30,000. That figure represents a deliberate prioritization of an event with deep social, cultural, and personal significance to the people writing the checks. Longitudinal financial research, including a widely cited study from Emory University, found an inverse relationship between wedding spending and marriage longevity. Couples who spent less on their weddings reported lower divorce rates on average, which means the guest criticizing the budget for excess may actually be arguing against the couple's best statistical interests. Wedding spending decisions involve weeks of negotiation between couples and frequently between families. A guest sees the output of that process, meaning the finished event, without visibility into the deliberation, compromise, and prioritization that produced it. Consumer behavior research shows that high investment events produce higher levels of perceived significance and memorability for participants. The couple's investment is not irrational relative to their stated goal of creating a memorable, meaningful day. A guest who attends, eats, drinks, dances, receives a favor, and occupies a seat that costs the couple between $85 and $290 to provide, while critiquing the budget that funded all of it, is simultaneously consuming the spending they are criticizing. That is a position of extraordinary bad faith. Critiquing a couple's wedding budget as a guest is like eating an entire restaurant meal and then explaining to the chef that they should have spent less on ingredients. 21. A guest who had no role in the venue selection process, no visibility into the planning timeline, and no financial contribution to the event offered detailed retrospective design notes during the reception, suggesting that the overall aesthetic did not align with what a wedding should look like, as though there exists a universal aesthetic standard filed somewhere that all weddings are legally required to meet. Venue aesthetic selection typically involves months of research, multiple venue tours, mood board development, fabric swatching, and coordination between the couple, their planner, their florist, and the venue coordinator. It is one of the most deliberate and time-intensive decisions of the entire planning process. Modern wedding aesthetics span an intentional and professionally supported range. Industrial, bohemian, minimalist, maximalist, vintage, tropical, and rustic are all legitimate, celebrated design categories with dedicated vendors, publications, and following. The guest's reference aesthetic is derived from previous weddings they attended, which reflects that couple's choices, not any governing standard. The wedding aesthetic functions as a visual expression of the couple's shared identity. For many couples, the aesthetic selection is the first truly joint creative decision they make together, and it is made carefully. Event design publications, bridal magazines, and wedding platforms exist specifically to document and celebrate aesthetic diversity in weddings. No single aesthetic holds professional or cultural authority over others. Cultural context matters enormously here as well. Aesthetic choices that reflect South Asian, East Asian, African, or Latin American wedding traditions may read as unfamiliar to a guest operating exclusively from a Western aesthetic framework. That unfamiliarity belongs to the guest, not the event. The couple's aesthetic has been applied, approved, paid for, and delivered before the first guest walks through the door. Offering unsolicited venue aesthetic notes at someone's wedding is like attending an art exhibition and telling the artist their work should have been in a different style. 22. A guest consumed the cocktail hour offerings at a reasonable pace, arrived at the end of them, and then formally reported to the event coordinator that the quantity did not meet their personal caloric requirements. The coordinator, who was managing 17 other simultaneous tasks, received this information with professional composure. Cocktail hour food is appetizer scale hospitality by design. This is not an accident or an oversight. It is a deliberately defined event segment with a specific and well-understood catering purpose. Light appetizers to occupy guests during photo sessions and reception room setup, bridging the timeline gap between ceremony end and dinner service. Catering contracts for cocktail hours specify quantities per person based on industry standard appetizer portioning. Professional caterers calculate service quantities based on expected consumption rates developed across hundreds of events. They are not guessing. Cocktail hour food waste is a documented phenomenon. Caterers report that overestimating cocktail hour quantities routinely results in significant disposal, suggesting that standard industry portioning is already generous rather than insufficient. The sequence of cocktail hour followed by full dinner service is a publicly understood and widely practiced wedding format. A guest who arrives at the cocktail hour hungry has misread the event structure and managed their own hunger accordingly, which is a personal preparation issue rather than a hosting failure. Wedding timeline communication tools, including ceremony programs, wedding websites, and timeline cards, typically indicate dinner service timing. The information about when the main meal arrives is available. Guest complaints about cocktail hour food quantity are concentrated almost entirely among guests who chose not to eat before arriving at a multi-hour event, which is a personal logistics decision they made independently of anything the couple controlled. Complaining that cocktail hour appetizers did not fill you up is like complaining that movie theater popcorn was not nutritious enough for dinner. 23, at some point during the reception, a guest decided that the volume of the music was personally targeting them, approached the DJ booth to negotiate an adjustment, and upon being declined by a professional who was doing their job correctly, escalated the matter to the couple who were in the middle of their first dance. Professional wedding DJs and bands perform sound checks with the venue coordinator before guests arrive. Volume is calibrated to fill the room appropriately based on the space's acoustical properties, its physical dimensions, and the configuration of the speaker system. This is a technical process, not a casual guess. Many wedding venues, particularly those in urban locations, operate under municipal noise ordinances with specific decibel ceilings. The DJ's volume settings may reflect legal compliance, not personal preference, which means adjusting them downward is not always an option, even if the DJ were inclined to accommodate the request. Sound dispersion in event venues means that the volume experience varies significantly by table location. A guest positioned near a speaker cluster will experience dramatically different sound levels than guests at the center of the room or near the perimeter. The experience of volume is not uniform across the space. The professional standard for dance floor event sound is calibrated to be heard clearly on the dance floor while remaining conversational at perimeter tables. This is a balance that no single volume setting achieves perfectly for every person in the room simultaneously. The couple briefed their audio vendor on the desired atmosphere during planning. A loud, energetic reception is frequently a deliberate and primary part of the event experience they designed. Earplugs are available at pharmacies, cost less than $2, and represent a complete and portable solution to noise sensitivity at amplified events. Asking the DJ to turn down at a dance reception is like attending a basketball game and requesting the crowd to stay quieter so you can hear yourself think. 24, a Friday evening wedding was received by a guest as a scheduling imposition, and that guest spent time before, during, and after the event. Ensuring people understood that weekday weddings were a form of social inconsideration. The couple, who had saved approximately 20 to 50% on their venue by booking a Friday rather than a Saturday, was unaware that their financial decision required external ethical clearance. Venue rental rates for weekday events are substantially lower than Saturday rates at comparable facilities. A couple choosing a Friday or Sunday wedding is making a financially responsible decision that frequently allows a higher quality venue, better catering, or improved amenities within the same overall budget. The guests benefited from that decision at the cocktail hour and did not say thank you. The wedding industry's concentration on Saturdays is a post-World War II cultural development tied to the standardization of the 5-day work week. It is a convention of scheduling convenience, not a legal or etiquette requirement. There is no rule that weddings must occur on Saturdays. Friday evening weddings are the second most common wedding day in the United States. Sunday weddings have grown significantly in recent years as couples seek Saturday-adjacent timing without Saturday pricing. Both formats are mainstream. Save the date and invitation lead times are precisely designed to give guests sufficient advance notice to arrange work schedules, request time off, and make travel arrangements. The system anticipates non-Saturday dates. It was built for this. Venue contracts for popular Saturday dates frequently require minimum guest counts or spending floors that are financially prohibitive for couples with moderate budgets. Weekday flexibility opens doors. A guest who cannot attend due to a genuine scheduling conflict has a socially acceptable and available option. Decline the invitation graciously without editorial. Complaining a wedding is on a Friday is like declining a concert ticket because Tuesday is your personal television night. 25. A guest observed the couple's choreographed first dance, identified it as rehearsed, and delivered the verdict that a prepared performance felt inauthentic at a wedding, which is a critique so internally confused it needs a moment to fully land. The problem identified was that the couple had practiced. That is the complaint. The first dance as a formal reception element dates only to the early 20th century in American wedding culture. It is a recent convention with no canonical correct form, no required tempo, no mandated style, and no authority specifying what it should look like. Choreographed first dances have been a recognized and celebrated format since at least the mid-2000s, when viral wedding dance videos generated massive cultural enthusiasm and mainstream media coverage. The format has been mainstream for nearly 2 decades. Dance studios that specialize in wedding choreography report booking calendars that extend months in advance, indicating widespread and enthusiastic demand. This is not a niche choice. A choreographed first dance represents weeks of lessons, sustained rehearsal time, and physical preparation. It is a genuine investment of effort, coordination, and vulnerability that says something specific about how seriously the couple takes their public celebration of each other. Wedding entertainment research shows that choreographed or unexpected first dances are among the most frequently cited memorable moments in post-event guest surveys. They generate positive engagement at rates that consistently exceed traditional slow dances. The historical slow dance default became standard through cultural repetition, not through formal rule or etiquette mandate. It is a convention. Conventions can be departed from without consequence, particularly when the departure represents more effort, more creativity, and more joy than the convention would have produced. Criticizing a choreographed first dance for being too prepared is like criticizing a live performance for having been rehearsed. 26. Upon learning the reception would be alcohol-free, a guest treated this information as a targeted social insult and spent the pre-ceremony period identifying the nearest offsite bar as an exit strategy, a contingency plan for surviving several hours at a free, catered, professionally staffed celebration of 2 people they presumably care about. Dry weddings are a mainstream, fully legitimate practice in communities with religious traditions that prohibit alcohol, including large segments of the Muslim, Mormon, Baptist, and Seventh-day Adventist communities. These communities represent tens of millions of Americans. The choice requires no justification to anyone. The cost of open bar service at a large wedding can range from $1,500 to $8,000 or more, depending on duration, guest count, and beverage selection. Couples who forgo alcohol frequently redirect that budget toward better food, a better venue, longer entertainment coverage, or guest experience amenities that everyone benefits from regardless of their relationship to alcohol. The guests benefited from those redirected funds and filed a complaint anyway. Alcohol service at events introduces genuine liability exposure. Dram shop laws exist. Couples who choose dry weddings are making a legally defensible choice that protects guests and themselves from alcohol-related incidents that could follow the event for years. Guest experience research shows that dry weddings with excellent food, strong entertainment, and genuine warmth receive consistently positive feedback. Alcohol is not the determinative variable in whether guests have a good time. The assumption that social events require alcohol to succeed is a cultural construct, not a factual prerequisite, and one that large portions of the population actively reject for reasons that are entirely their own. No etiquette authority requires the provision of alcohol at any event. Its absence does not violate any hospitality standard. Being upset that a wedding does not serve alcohol is like being upset that a morning yoga class does not serve cocktails. 27. A guest, upon discovering a buffet rather than plated service, announced to their table that the catering format was beneath the occasion. They said this while standing in front of a fully stocked, professionally staffed, catered spread they had not cooked, purchased, or arranged in any capacity. Buffet catering at weddings is a fully professional, widely practiced format with documented advantages over plated service in specific venue and guest contexts. It is not a downgrade. It is a different service model with a different set of strengths. buffets allow higher per item ingredient quality for equivalent budgets because the labor savings of self-service can be redirected toward better food. The guest eating from a buffet is frequently eating better food than they would have from a plated alternative at the same price point. Plated dinner service requires significantly larger catering staff, higher coordination overhead, and longer service windows that restrict guest movement during dinner. Buffets allow guests to eat on their own timeline, in the quantities they prefer, choosing specifically what appeals to them. Many of the world's most celebrated culinary traditions are most authentically served in shared, communal formats. South Asian wedding cuisine, Middle Eastern meze traditions, Latin American celebrations, and Southern American hospitality are all rooted in communal service. Reducing them to plated portions would be the actual insult. Guest dietary diversity is more easily accommodated by buffet formats. Individuals can navigate options and adjust portions without requiring the couple to anticipate every need, intolerance, and preference in advance through a static meal selection system. The association of plated service with formality and buffet with informality is a cultural assumption, not a culinary or etiquette standard. Countless black tie events operate with buffet service successfully. Declaring a buffet beneath a wedding's dignity is like saying a potluck Thanksgiving is less meaningful than one where someone plated your turkey. 28. A guest who attended a wedding ceremony that included religious elements they did not personally share found this experience uncomfortable and subsequently communicated their discomfort through post-event channels as though the couple had made an error that warranted correction. The couple had gotten married in accordance with their own faith and their own community. That is what a wedding ceremony is. The majority of American weddings include some form of religious or spiritual element. Pew Research Center data confirms that approximately 77% of couples include religious components in their ceremony, even when they do not attend services regularly. The religious ceremony is not the exception. In many communities, it is the overwhelming norm. Religious ceremonies are conducted by ordained clergy operating under the authority of a specific faith tradition. The content of the ceremony is frequently determined not only by the couple's preferences, but by the formal requirements of their faith. There are things that cannot be removed without violating the tradition itself. A guest attending a wedding of a different faith tradition is having a widely documented human experience in a religiously diverse society. Etiquette universally positions respectful, quiet attendance as the guest's obligation, not agreement, not enthusiasm, respectful attendance. Those are very low stakes. Interfaith weddings, which are among the most complex ceremonies to plan, involve significant negotiation between traditions precisely to honor both families. A guest's retroactive content critique misunderstands the delicate and deliberate balance the couple achieved. The guest was a visitor in a ceremony designed for and around other people. The religious content was not aimed at them. It was not about them. Criticizing the religious content of someone else's wedding ceremony is like attending a cultural festival and filing a complaint that the traditions were not yours. 29. A guest arrived at an outdoor ceremony venue, observed that the venue was outdoors, and subsequently launched a complaint about not having been warned. The venue's name included the word estate. The invitation listed an address resolvable in under 30 seconds on any mapping application. The guest had been in possession of the save the date for several months. The outdoor nature of the event was not a hidden variable released at arrival. It was in the name of the venue. It was on the invitation. It was on the wedding website. It was accessible through the most basic possible internet search that any person with a smartphone, which the guest demonstrably possessed, could have completed at any point between receiving the save the date and walking through the gate. Outdoor venue names referencing gardens, estates, vineyards, parks, or specific landscape features communicate their character in their names. This is not subtle. Wedding planning websites list venue type as one of the primary search and filter categories. Outdoor venues are distinctly tagged and described across all major platforms. The information infrastructure for understanding what kind of venue you are attending before you arrive is comprehensive, freely available, and requires minimal effort. Professional wedding planners advise couples to include venue information cards with invitations for distant guests, typically including a venue website link so guests can review the property. Wedding websites, now provided by the vast majority of couples, include detailed venue information, often with exterior photographs, parking details, and notes on what to expect. Weather preparation for outdoor events is a guest responsibility. Seasons exist, regional climates are documented, and weather forecasts are publicly available at no cost on multiple platforms. The guest had every available tool to prepare. Complaining you were not warned that an outdoor venue was outdoors is like complaining a swimming pool was wet. 30, a guest tasted the wedding cake, determined it was not the flavor they personally would have selected, and communicated this assessment with a directness suggesting the couple had made a correctable culinary error. The cake was lemon. The guest preferred vanilla. The couple did not ask. Wedding cake selection typically involves a formal tasting session with the bakery at which the couple samples multiple flavor combinations before making a deliberate, informed final decision. It is not a random outcome. It is a considered choice made by the two people whose wedding it is, for reasons that are entirely their own and require no outside validation. Wedding cakes are designed to please the couple. There is no etiquette convention that requires flavor polling of the guest list, and no major authority suggests such a practice exists or should. Most professional wedding cakes include multiple tiers that can feature different flavor combinations, providing internal variety within a single cake service. A guest who dislikes one layer has alternatives. The flavor of a wedding cake has no relationship to the quality of the event, the depth of the couple's commitment, or the guest's overall experience of the day. It is one sweet course in a multi-hour celebration of a human relationship. Pastry chefs who specialize in wedding cakes report that lemon, champagne, vanilla almond, and red velvet are among the most frequently requested flavors. Any of those will be less preferred by some segment of guests regardless of which is chosen. Satisfying all palates simultaneously with a single flavor selection is not possible. It is also not the goal. A guest who dislikes the cake has an immediately available and entirely consequence-free solution. Do not eat it. The decision to file a complaint instead represents a genuine choice. Criticizing the flavor of a wedding cake you did not bake, did not pay for, and are not required to eat is the culinary equivalent of reviewing a gift. 31. Upon learning that the bride intended to keep her surname or hyphenate it, or that the groom intended to take hers, a guest delivered an unsolicited opinion about the social and familial implications of the naming decision with the conviction of a legal scholar and the authority of someone who would face zero consequences from whatever the couple decided. Surname decisions following marriage are personal, legal, and identity choices made by the two adults getting married, nobody else. Name change. Following marriage is legally governed by state family law and executed through a personal legal process entirely controlled by the individuals involved. The tradition of a wife taking her husband's surname is a cultural convention, not a legal requirement. It was the default practice in most American states until relatively recently and was never legally mandated. Surname retention by married women has been legally protected in the United States since the 1970s following significant judicial challenges. Courts in multiple states affirmed a woman's right to retain her name at marriage through formal legal proceedings. The right exists. It is settled. Hyphenated surnames, blended surnames, and newly created surnames are all legally recognized naming conventions in the United States and increasingly common as couples choose to honor both family identities simultaneously. In a growing number of Western countries, a husband taking his wife's surname is a recognized and legally straightforward option. The cultural novelty of a practice does not diminish its legitimacy. A guest's discomfort with a couple's naming convention affects no aspect of the guest's life whatsoever. The couple's chosen name has no material impact on anyone outside their own household and immediate legal relationships. This is not a close call. Commenting on a couple's surname decision at their wedding is like offering feedback on what they plan to name their future children. unsolicited, irrelevant, and immediately unwelcome. 32. The absence of a bouquet toss was flagged as a planning omission by a guest who had mentally allocated time in the evening for the tradition and arrived at the reception expecting to see it. The couple had not included it. The guest wanted to know why. The bouquet toss has medieval European origins tied to the belief that touching the bride brought good fortune. Guests would historically rush the bride to grab pieces of her dress or bouquet directly from her body, which eventually evolved into a controlled throw as a safer alternative to being physically mobbed. The sanitized version now involves unmarried women being assembled and assigned positions for a competitive catch. Contemporary wedding etiquette authorities, including the Knot, Brides Magazine, and Emily Post, all explicitly list the bouquet toss as optional. Optional means not required. Not required means no explanation is owed for its omission. Surveys of wedding guests show that the bouquet toss generates significantly mixed responses. Many single female guests report finding the tradition uncomfortable, awkward, or reductive rather than joyful. The pressure to participate in a public symbolic competition for marriage is not universally experienced as fun. Wedding planners report that bouquet toss alternatives, including anniversary dances honoring the longest married couple in the room, unity candle ceremonies, and charitable bouquet donations, have become mainstream choices. These carry equivalent symbolic weight without the social pressure element. The couple's decision to include or exclude any traditional element is precisely that, a decision. It reflects their values, their aesthetic, and their vision for their own event. No guest was assigned curatorial authority over the program. A guest was not on the planning committee. They were on the guest list. Demanding a bouquet toss because you personally anticipated it is like demanding a birthday party include pin the tail on the donkey, because that is what you remember birthday parties looking like. 33. A guest who had a brief, pleasant, entirely adequate interaction with the couple during cocktail hour filed a post-event report that the couple had failed to circulate sufficiently, having observed them eating dinner, dancing with each other, and spending time with immediate family during the reception. The guest wanted more. The wedding day timeline for the couple begins between 6 and 8 in the morning with hair and makeup preparation and extends through midnight or later. By the time the reception is underway, the couple has been performing at the highest possible social and emotional register for 8 to 10 hours without a break. The reception arrives at the end of that, not the beginning. Professional wedding planners build table visit segments into reception timelines as a deliberate allocation. Couples who follow their planner's schedule are managing a tightly constrained event program, not neglecting guests. The couple is simultaneously managing vendor coordination, photography obligations, family introductions, ceremonial moments, and the unpredictable day of issues that surface at every large event. Their attention is not casually available for extended individual guest conversations on demand. Reception venue timelines include vendor departure windows that cannot be extended. Every segment of the evening has a hard cutoff. The pressure this creates on the couple's time is real and constant throughout the night. Guests at large weddings, those exceeding 100 people, statistically receive an average of 1 to 3 minutes of direct couple interaction across the entire event. This is a mathematical reality, not a hospitality failure. 150 guests cannot each receive meaningful individual time from 2 people managing a 6-hour production. The couple is the only 2 people at the event for whom the day is simultaneously the most joyful and the most operationally demanding experience of their lives. Complaining the couple did not spend enough time with you at their wedding is like complaining the performer at a sold-out concert did not personally greet you backstage. 34. A guest identified multiple surface elements of the wedding, specifically the venue type, the song choices, and the ceremony structure, as reminiscent of another wedding they had attended, and expressed disappointment in the couple's lack of originality, as though the couple had plagiarized another couple's event and owed someone a citation. Weddings share structural elements because those structures work. The ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, dancing, and cake-cutting sequence evolved over decades because it successfully moves large groups of people through an emotionally significant day with the right pacing. These are not cliches, they are proven frameworks. Venue types cluster by region because the available venue pool in any given metropolitan area is finite. Popular wedding venues service dozens to hundreds of events annually. A guest who attends multiple weddings in the same city will encounter the same venues because those are the venues. Popular wedding songs are popular because they resonate emotionally with large numbers of people. A couple choosing a widely loved song is expressing genuine feeling about music that matters to them, not recycling content. Wedding trend data shows strong regional and demographic clustering. Couples draw from a shared cultural vocabulary that includes overlapping inspiration sources, the same local vendor pool, and similar aesthetic movements happening simultaneously across a region. This is how culture works. The emotional experience of a wedding is shaped by the specific people present, the specific relationship being celebrated, and the specific context of that particular day. None of these are replicated regardless of surface similarities in decor, venue, or musical genre. The couple did not attend the other wedding as their own experience. What reads as familiar in the guest comparative database is entirely new to the two people in the center of it. Criticizing a wedding for resembling another wedding is like criticizing a sunset for looking like previous sunsets. 35. A guest found the dinner portion of the reception insufficiently stimulating and communicated a preference for additional entertainment programming to supplement the experience of consuming a fully catered multi-course meal, drinking from an open bar, and being surrounded by other humans they presumably chose to maintain relationships with. The dinner hour was itself the entertainment, that is what it is. Wedding reception dinner service is a formal hospitality event in its own right. The meal, the company, the ambient music, and the toasts that occur during dinner represent a complete and deliberately designed program. A dinner where guests eat, drink, and talk to each other is not a gap in programming. It is the programming. Event design research consistently identifies dinner service as the primary opportunity for guest-to-guest connection. The shared table format is specifically designed to produce conversation and human connection. That is its function. Entertainment additions during dinner service, including casino tables, photo booths, and lawn games, are supplemental amenities that many couples provide at additional cost. Consistent data shows that a significant portion of guests do not engage with these additions even when they are available. Providing them does not guarantee engagement and does not resolve the complaint being filed here. The speeches, toasts, and couple moments that occur during dinner, including the first dance, cake cutting, and parent dances, are programming. A dinner hour containing multiple speeches and ceremonial moments is a full entertainment schedule, not empty time requiring supplemental content. Background music during dinner service is a curated audio experience that most couples invest in deliberately. Ambient musical programming is itself a form of entertainment that requires vendor selection, playlist curation, and payment. Complaining that dinner at a wedding was not entertaining enough is like complaining that a dinner party did not have enough activities scheduled between courses. 36. A guest who drove themselves, parked without incident, and arrived at the venue on time, nonetheless filed a formal complaint that a shuttle service should have been provided, citing the presence of alcohol at the reception as the couple's legal and ethical obligation to fund every guest's transportation home from an event the guest attended voluntarily. Shuttle services for wedding guests are classified by every major wedding planning authority as an optional hospitality upgrade. Not a standard expectation, not an etiquette requirement, not a legal obligation. An optional amenity that generous couples sometimes choose to provide. The legal responsibility for a guest's decision to drink and drive belongs to that guest. Dram shop liability in most states applies to commercial alcohol servers, not to private event hosts who provided a hosted bar as a courtesy. Couples who do provide shuttle services report that a measurable percentage of guests decline to use them, preferring rideshare, designated drivers, or personal arrangements. The shuttle is a costly provision with inconsistent uptake even among the guests who complained about its absence. Rideshare services operate in virtually every metropolitan and mid-sized city in the United States. A guest with a smartphone has a private transportation solution available within minutes of requesting it at a cost they control, going directly to their destination. Hotel room blocks, one of the most common guest accommodation provisions couples arrange, are specifically designed to allow nearby guests to walk or arrange short-distance transport independently. The cost of a chartered shuttle for 150 guests ranges from $800 to $3,000 depending on distance and vehicle type. It is a real and significant budget line that many couples cannot accommodate after venue, catering, photography, and music expenses are settled. Demanding a wedding shuttle as a guest is like expecting a restaurant to send a car to your home because they serve wine. 37. A guest who became aware that a vow renewal was being held for a milestone anniversary used the occasion to deliver a running commentary on how unnecessary the whole affair was. Apparently under the impression that their philosophical stance on the redundancy of recommitment was information the celebrating couple needed to receive. Vow renewals have no formal legal standing. They are purely ceremonial, which means they are freed entirely from the legal and logistical constraints that govern first weddings. They exist for one reason only, because two people who have built a life together want to say so publicly in front of the people they love in a way that feels meaningful to them. That is the complete list of reasons required. The practice of publicly reaffirming marital commitment has documented precedent in multiple religious traditions, including Catholic marriage enrichment movements and Protestant covenant renewal ceremonies that have existed for generations. This is not a social media invention. Vow renewals increased significantly in cultural popularity across the 90s and 2000s as couples with longer life expectancies sought meaningful ways to mark milestones. They are a mainstream and documented cultural phenomenon, not a performance of insecurity. No major etiquette authority lists attendance at a vow renewal as carrying any obligation heavier than attendance at any other social celebration. Gift giving is explicitly optional. The ask on the guest is minimal. Research on long-term marriage satisfaction shows that couples who engage in deliberate public recommitment rituals report a higher relationship satisfaction scores. The ceremony serves a documented relational function that benefits the couple's actual marriage. The guest who found it unnecessary is not in the marriage. Their assessment of what the marriage needs is not data anyone solicited. Calling a vow renewal unnecessary is like calling a birthday party unnecessary because the person was already born. 38. Upon learning the couple's honeymoon destination, a guest who was not going on the honeymoon, had not been asked, and had no financial stake in the outcome, delivered an unsolicited destination critique and offered alternative recommendations with the confidence of a travel agent who had been specifically retained for this purpose. Honeymoon destinations are selected based on factors that are entirely private to the couple. Their budget, their travel preferences, their available vacation time, any physical accessibility considerations, and what they actually want to do together during the first week of their marriage. None of these factors are visible to a guest, and none of them are any of a guest's business. The honeymoon travel industry is one of the most diverse segments of the market, encompassing adventure travel, urban exploration, beach resorts, cultural immersion trips, national park itineraries, and cruise packages. No destination type holds objective superiority over another. Travel preference research shows that honeymoon satisfaction is most strongly predicted by alignment with the couple's shared travel style, not destination prestige, not proximity to Instagram-worthy landmarks, and not alignment with what a guest thinks sounds impressive. The average American couple spends between $4,000 and $5,000 on the honeymoon travel. This involves careful research, price comparison, airline scheduling, accommodation selection, and activity planning. It is not a casual decision made without thought. International honeymoon travel additionally involves visa requirements, vaccination documentation, travel insurance procurement, and logistical coordination that the couple managed entirely without the guest's input and will continue without it. A guest's preferred honeymoon destination is information relevant exclusively to that guest's own future honeymoon planning. where they are welcome to apply it without restriction. Critiquing someone's honeymoon destination is like correcting someone's grocery list. It is their trip, their budget, and their itinerary. 39. A guest who spent a portion of the reception photographing food, florals, and the couple's first dance for their own social media use simultaneously expressed the opinion that the couple's decision to allow and encourage social media sharing cheapened the event, apparently without noticing the philosophical tension in that position. Couples are increasingly thoughtful about social media policies at their weddings. The unplugged ceremony movement, which asks guests to put devices away during the ceremony itself, and the fully shareable reception approach are both legitimate and deliberate hosting choices with large followings. Both are valid. Both reflect real values. Social media wedding content serves genuine functions that a guest filing this complaint overlooked entirely. Live sharing through stories and real-time posts has become an accepted form of virtual inclusion for distant family members, elderly relatives who cannot travel, and close friends who face unavoidable conflicts. When the couple has considered this and chosen to embrace it, that is the couple making a decision about their own event and their own community. Wedding hashtag culture has been a professionally supported practice for over a decade. Planners, photographers, and videographers regularly incorporate couple hashtags into their event planning because guest-captured content supplements professional photography by covering candid moments from angles and positions the professional photographer cannot occupy simultaneously. The guest photographs of the centerpieces are in this category. They are part of the shared record the couple encouraged. Couples who choose fully unplugged events and couples who embrace full sharing both report satisfaction with their choice when the choice was clearly communicated in advance. The guest who personally dislikes social media sharing has one readily available solution. Do not share content personally and disengage from what others share. Complaining that a wedding allows social media while you photograph the centerpieces is arguing against a fire while holding the match. 40. A guest who was not invited to an intimate ceremony of 15 people declared the couple selfish for limiting their wedding and spent considerable energy making sure people who were invited understood that the exclusion of others was a character flaw requiring public discussion. Micro-weddings, typically defined as events under 20 guests, are a fully legitimate wedding format with significant and well-documented advantages. They are not a lesser version of a real wedding. They are a different and deliberate version. Micro-weddings increased dramatically in popularity during the pandemic period and have retained that popularity because couples recognize something that large wedding culture does not advertise. Intimate ceremonies are often more emotionally connected, more present, and more meaningful for the people at the center of them. The average micro-wedding costs between $5,000 and $15,000 compared to $30,000 for a full wedding. The savings are frequently redirected toward a better honeymoon, a home purchase down payment, or other long-term priorities that serve the couple's actual life. Intimate weddings are documented by relationship researchers as producing more emotionally engaged ceremonies because the couple is surrounded exclusively by people with deep personal significance to them. There is no dilution. Every person in the room matters to both of them. No etiquette standard, legal requirement, or cultural authority specifies a minimum guest count for a valid wedding. A legally binding marriage ceremony can take place with 2 witnesses and an officiant. Guest list decisions for micro-weddings involve painful prioritization. Couples frequently exclude colleagues, distant cousins, and casual friends in favor of their innermost circle. This is arithmetic, not rejection. The guest who was not included was not removed from something they had. They were never in the pool. Being upset about not being invited to a 15-person wedding is like being upset about not being invited to a private family dinner. 41. A guest reviewed the couple's shared wedding photographs, identified the moody film grain aesthetic as too dark, or the light and airy editing as too washed out, or the documentary style as insufficiently posed, and delivered a style critique as though the couple had hired the wrong photographer by mistake and would want to know. The couple did not hire the wrong photographer. They hired the exact photographer they researched, selected, met with, reviewed the portfolio of, and signed a contract with after months of deliberation. Couples typically review hundreds of photographer portfolios before selecting a vendor whose specific editing style, compositional approach, and shooting philosophy aligns with their vision for the day. The style they received is the style they purchased. Wedding photography aesthetics have diversified significantly over the past 2 decades. Light and airy, dark and moody, documentary photojournalistic, fine art editorial, and film emulation are all recognized professional styles with dedicated markets, trained practitioners, and devoted client bases. None is objectively superior to the others. The couple chose theirs because it spoke to them, which is precisely how aesthetic decisions are supposed to work. Post-processing editing style, including color grading, contrast treatment, shadow handling, and grain application, is part of the photographer's professional signature. It is what distinguishes them in a crowded market. It is a primary selling point. The couple bought it intentionally. Photography style preference is among the most subjective possible aesthetic judgments. What reads as too dark to one person reads as dramatic and cinematic to another. What feels too bright to one guest looks warm and romantic to the couple in it. The photographs belong to the couple. They are a private document of a personal event shared at the couple's discretion, and their quality is judged by one metric: whether the couple loves them. Critiquing a couple's wedding photo style is like one-starring an artist's work because you prefer a different medium. 42. A ceremony that began 15 minutes behind schedule generated a complaint operation covering the couple's time management competence, the venue's organizational capacity, and the general disrespect shown to guests who had arrived promptly, all delivered with the gravity appropriate to a delay of significantly greater consequence than 15 minutes at a celebration. Professional wedding planners build buffer time into every segment of a wedding day timeline, specifically because multi-vendor live events with dozens of moving parts routinely experience minor variances. Buffers of 15 to 30 minutes are standard planning practice. They are not oversights, they are engineering. Bridal preparation, meaning hair and makeup for a full wedding party, is a multi-hour process managed by professional stylists on a pre-planned schedule. Unexpected delays in this process, a reaction to a product, a vendor running behind from a previous appointment, a last-minute touch-up, cascade through the day's timeline in ways no single person controls and no amount of preparation fully prevents. Wedding delays are so statistically common that the industry colloquially refers to events running on wedding time, a widely understood acknowledgement that large, complex, emotionally charged events involving human beings rarely execute to the exact minute. Guest arrival patterns are themselves a timing variable. Late arriving VIP family members whose presence is required before the processional begins are among the most common sources of ceremony delays. The couple cannot start without them. Venue coordinator issues, including room setup completion, sound system calibration, and floral arrangement finishing, are third-party variables entirely outside the couple's direct control on the day. A guest who arrived on time to a 50-minute late ceremony was inconvenienced by an amount of time shorter than the average commercial break during a network television program. Filing a complaint about a 50-minute wedding delay is like demanding a refund because a flight pushed back from the gate slightly late. 43. A guest arrived at the reception, assessed the color palette as terracotta and sage, or navy and burgundy, or blush against warm neutrals, concluded audibly that it did not work, and delivered this assessment to surrounding tables in a tones typically reserved for announcements of structural defects. Wedding color palette selection is a collaborative design process between the couple, the florist, the venue coordinator, and frequently an event designer. It involves mood board development, fabric swatching, and venue color compatibility analysis. It is not a guess. It is a coordinated professional process that takes into account the specific light conditions of the specific venue at the specific time of year the wedding is being held. Color trend data for the wedding industry is published annually by Pantone, The Knot, and major bridal platforms. Couples working with current palettes are engaging with professionally curated aesthetic guidance, not operating in an aesthetic vacuum. Color theory and event design considers venue architecture, natural and artificial light, linen and floral availability, and how colors render in photography. The palette is chosen to function in a specific physical environment, which the couple and their vendors have toured, evaluated, and designed around. The guest has not done any of this. Color preferences are also culturally significant in ways that a guest operating from a single aesthetic framework may not recognize. Specific colors carry meaning in South Asian, East Asian, African, and Latin American wedding traditions that transform the guest's "it doesn't work" into something more specifically, "it doesn't look like what I expected," which is a different statement with very different implications. Guest color preference is among the most subjective possible inputs. Color psychology research shows enormous individual variation in color response. Announcing a wedding's color palette doesn't work is like telling an architect their completed building should have been painted differently after you've already moved in. 44. A guest who did not proactively communicate any seating preferences during the planning process, did not reach out to flag any interpersonal dynamics the couple should know about, and did not use any of the available channels to provide input, arrived at the reception and discovered they were seated near a complicated family member, then suggested the couple should have done more due diligence. The average wedding seating chart for 150 guests involves managing approximately 11,000 possible two-person proximity relationships simultaneously. Comprehensively mapping every interpersonal tension, every unresolved family conflict, every social awkwardness across that full matrix is not a realistic planning task for two people who also have jobs, families, and a wedding to organize. Couples rely on family members to communicate significant seating concerns during these planning process. This is the system. A guest who did not communicate a concern waived their opportunity to influence the outcome. The window existed. It was not used. Professional event planners who specialize in seating construction report that post-event complaints almost always involve dynamics that were never communicated to the couple during planning. The couple did not know. They were not told. They cannot manage information they do not have. Seating charts go through 4 to 7 complete revisions as RSVPs shift and collapse across the planning period. A placement that seems deliberate may simply reflect the configuration that survived the final revision, not a considered statement about any relationship. The social expectation that adults can sit near complicated relatives for a 3-hour dinner without incident is not an unreasonable assumption. It is a baseline social competence expectation that the seating chart did not create and is not responsible for resolving. Blaming the couple for your table placement near a difficult relative is like blaming the airline for seat proximity when you did not select a seat. 45. A young child performing the role of flower girl stopped mid-aisle to wave at her grandmother, turned in the wrong direction twice, sat down briefly on the runner, then recovered and completed the walk with the scattered petals she had not yet dispersed. A guest treated this sequence as a ceremony management failure requiring post-event documentation. The flower girl was 4 years old. The flower girl and ring bearer traditions in Western weddings date to Victorian England, where children symbolized innocence and the beginning of new life. The tradition was designed around children's authentic, unmanaged presence. It was not designed around choreographic precision because the Victorians understood something the complaining guest does not. A child being genuinely themselves is the entire point. Professional wedding planners and officiants consistently brief couples that children in ceremonial roles will behave unpredictably. They advise couples to embrace this rather than manage it, because the spontaneity is not a bug. It is the feature that makes the moment human. Viral wedding moments involving children who stop to wave, sit down mid-aisle, deliver the rings to the wrong person, or become briefly distracted by a dog in the front row are among the most shared and celebrated wedding content online. The public response to these moments is overwhelmingly positive because people recognize authenticity when they see it. Child development research establishes that children under 8 are physiologically incapable of sustained public performance under a high social pressure. Their behavior in stimulating environments will always reflect their developmental stage. This is not a planning failure, it is biology. The ceremony is made more human, more memorable, and more emotionally resonant by the presence of a child being genuinely a child. Complaining that a 4-year-old did not execute the processional correctly is like giving a negative review to a puppy for not sitting still during a photograph. 46. A guest, having attended the ceremony, produced a performance evaluation of the efficient covering delivery style, tonal register, humor content, and overall runtime, with specific recommendations for improvement, as though they had been seated in a professional assessment panel rather than a folding chair as an invited guest. Officiant selection is one of the most intimate choices a couple makes during planning. It is driven by factors that are deeply personal: religious affiliation, existing relationship with the officiant, communication style compatibility, and the couple's specific vision for the ceremony's emotional tone. These are not criteria any guest has access to from the outside. Many couples choose officiants who are personally meaningful over polished professionals, specifically because the relationship is the point. A childhood friend who has known the groom for 30 years and becomes ordained to perform the ceremony is offering something a hired professional cannot replicate, which is 30 years of actual context. Friend and family officiants who obtain ordination to marry a couple they love represent one of the fastest growing segments of the ceremony space. Their occasional informality, nerves, or unconventional delivery is a feature of genuine personal investment, not evidence of professional inadequacy. Professional officiants spend multiple pre-ceremony consultations developing a script that reflects the couple's specific story and values. What the guest experiences as the output of the ceremony is the result of that collaborative process. The guest's aesthetic preference for a different delivery style is not information the officiant needed or the couple solicited. The officiant's legal function, conducting a valid civil marriage, is fulfilled completely regardless of how the guest rated the performance. The marriage is legal. The ceremony happened. Delivering a performance review on someone's wedding officiant is like critiquing the doctor who delivered a healthy baby for their bedside manner. 47. A guest attended a thoughtfully planned, genuinely warm, logistically successful wedding and departed with the assessment that the budget was visibly insufficient, as though the dollar amount spent was a public declaration of how seriously the couple takes their own marriage, and their guests deserve to weigh in on whether the number clears the bar. Wedding budget has no documented relationship to marital validity, sincerity, or longevity. That is not an opinion. That is the finding of longitudinal marriage research, including a widely cited Emory University study that found an inverse relationship between wedding spending and marriage duration. Couples who spent less reported lower divorce rates on average. The guest arguing for bigger spending is, statistically, arguing against the couple's long-term interests. Financial planning authorities universally advise couples to avoid debt-financed weddings. A couple who stays within their means is demonstrating financial responsibility that supports long-term relational stability. That is the behavior being criticized. The experiential quality of a wedding, meaning how guests actually feel, what they remember, how connected they feel to the couple, is driven by warmth, intention, atmosphere, and genuine hospitality. None of these scale linearly with budget. High-end wedding vendors consistently report that their most creatively satisfying work involves couples who made highly deliberate choices within modest budgets, because constraint produces focus. A guest who assesses a wedding sincerity by its catering tier is applying a consumption-based value framework to a human relationship event. That is a category error of some philosophical depth. The couple's financial resources and priorities are entirely private. A guest has no access to what the budget represents in the context of the couple's actual financial situation, what sacrifices produced it, or what it means relative to their other obligations and goals. Judging a marriage by its wedding budget is like judging a book's quality by the price of its cover. 48. A guest affiliated with the parental generation used the wedding reception as an occasion to deliver an extended assessment that the couple had been insufficiently deferential to their parents' input during planning, presenting this observation as a character flaw requiring public acknowledgement. Wedding planning authority has shifted significantly over the past 50 years, and the shift tracks a specific and logical variable: who is paying. The tradition of parents, particularly the bride's parents, controlling wedding decisions was tied directly to the era when parents funded the wedding entirely. Financial contribution has always been the foundation for planning authority. Contemporary surveys show that the majority of couples fund at least a portion of their own wedding. Couples who self-fund hold full decision-making rights because that is how financial authority works in every other context a guest accepts without complaint. Family therapy research on wedding planning consistently identifies parental over-involvement, not under-involvement, as the more common source of pre-wedding conflict. Couples who maintain their own decision-making authority report dramatically lower planning stress. What the complaining guest interprets as disrespect, the couple's therapist would identify as a healthy boundary. The degree of parental involvement that is appropriate varies enormously by cultural tradition, family structure, financial arrangement, and individual relationship dynamics. There is no universal standard a guest can observe from the outside and apply with confidence. What reads as dismissive in one family tradition is standard adult autonomy in another. The wedding day outcome, a successful, legally binding, emotionally meaningful ceremony and celebration, is the measure of planning success. The couple produced that outcome. Whether they produced it with or without sufficient parental consultation is a family matter that ended when the invitations were mailed. Commenting on a couple's parental involvement is like critiquing how two adults manage their mortgage application. 49. A guest arrived at a wedding with a deliberate creative theme and responded to the cohesive, immersive environment by suggesting, with some conviction, that weddings should not have themes. The venue was celestial. The stationery featured constellations. The florals were deep blue and silver. The guests found this excessive and wanted the surrounding tables to know. Themed weddings have documented precedent across centuries. Royal and aristocratic weddings have incorporated deliberate aesthetic programs for as long as formal marriage ceremonies have been occasions for public display. This is not a modern invention driven by social media. The modern wedding industry's entire design infrastructure, including florists, rental companies, stationery designers, lighting vendors, and photographers, is organized around theme execution. Themed weddings represent a massive and growing market segment that the industry built itself around because couples consistently request it. Wedding planning platforms list theme selection as one of the foundational early planning decisions, alongside venue and date, because it drives all downstream design choices. Every florist, every linen rental, every stationery choice flows from it. Guest immersion in a consistent aesthetic environment is a documented contributor to event memorability. Research on experiential events shows that thematically cohesive gatherings are remembered more distinctly than generic ones, which is one reason couples invest in them. The distinction between a themed wedding and a well-designed wedding is largely one of intensity and legibility. All weddings with cohesive color palettes, unified florals, and consistent stationery are effectively themed. The guest attended a themed event. They just did not apply the word to the events they approved of retroactively. Objecting to a themed wedding because weddings should not have themes is like objecting to a costume party because parties should not have costumes. 50 rain fell during an outdoor wedding ceremony, and a guest spent the reception filing a retroactive weather management critique, implying that better foresight on the couple's part would have produced different meteorological conditions over the venue that afternoon. Professional wedding planners require outdoor venue clients to have written contingency plans. Tent rental, indoor backup space, and ceremony relocation protocols are standard contract inclusions for outdoor events. This is industry standard practice. The couple had a contingency plan. The contingency was executed. The guest was dry. Weather forecasting technology provides accurate 7-day predictions and increasingly reliable 14-day outlooks, but cannot predict rain at a specific location on a specific date with certainty far enough in advance to change a venue that was booked 12 months prior. The booking window and the forecast window do not overlap in a way that makes venue changes possible. Tent rental for outdoor weddings is one of the most commonly deployed weather contingency solutions. A tented reception in light rain is a fully functional event that many guests experience as atmospherically romantic rather than problematic. It is also a significant additional expense the couple absorbed to protect the guest experience. Wedding photography in overcast or rainy conditions has developed an entire aesthetic tradition. Umbrella portraits, dramatic diffuse light, and puddle reflections are elements photographers actively seek. Many couples look at their rainy day wedding photographs and find them more visually interesting than sunshine would have produced. Cultures worldwide celebrate rain on a wedding day as a symbol of good luck, fertility, and abundance. The negative interpretation of wedding rain is neither universal nor the only reasonable response to water falling from the sky. Blaming a couple for wedding rain is like blaming the pilot for turbulence. The professionals manage the situation and you are a passenger in weather. 51. A guest who attended a brief civil ceremony departed with the verdict that its brevity undermined the significance of the moment, as though emotional weight is a function of elapsed time and a commitment made in 8 minutes is proportionally less binding than one made in 90. Legal civil marriage ceremonies in the United States can be completed in as few as 2 minutes. The marriage produced is equally valid in law, equally recognized by every government agency, and equally binding on both parties regardless of whether it took 2 minutes or 2 hours. The law does not grade by duration. Many of history's most consequential public declarations were brief. The Gettysburg Address runs under 3 minutes. Its impact was not limited by its runtime. Minimalist ceremony design is a deliberate philosophical and aesthetic choice associated with intentionality. Couples who choose short ceremonies are frequently making a conscious statement about presence over performance, substance over spectacle, and the relationship itself for the event surrounding it. Research on ceremony satisfaction shows that couples report high satisfaction with short, intimate ceremonies when brevity was intentional. Dissatisfaction arises from ceremonies that feel rushed against their own design intent, not from ceremonies that were deliberately and successfully concise. The couple's experience of the ceremony, their emotional state, their presence with each other, the specific words they chose to say in front of the people they love, is the primary determinant of its meaning. That experience is independent of duration. Some of the world's most enduring marriage traditions, including Quaker silent meeting marriages and minimalist courthouse ceremonies, are extremely brief and carry profound cultural and personal significance within their communities. Judging a ceremony's meaning by how long it took is like judging a poem's quality by its word count. 52. A guest who was not given a copy of the event timeline had no role in its construction and was provided no context for how the evening was structured, determined within 2 hours of arrival that the event's pacing reflected poor organizational management, based primarily on the existence of a gap between the cocktail hour and dinner service. Professional wedding day timelines are typically 8 to 12 pages of minute-by-minute scheduling, coordinated simultaneously across the photographer, caterer, DJ or band, venue coordinator, officiant, transportation vendors, and any additional specialists. They are not casual documents. They are operational plans of genuine complexity. The gaps guests experience between event segments are intentional buffer periods engineered into the timeline for specific purposes. Photo session completion, room transition from ceremony to reception layout, catering preparation windows, and sound system setup. These gaps are managed, not missed. Wedding planners are in constant radio contact with all vendors throughout the event, making real-time adjustments that are entirely invisible to guests. The smooth execution guests experience is the product of active management they are not observing. Catering service timing is driven by kitchen logistics. Courses are plated and released based on preparation windows that cannot be arbitrarily accelerated regardless of a guest's timeline preference. A gap before dinner service is frequently a kitchen management reality, not a scheduling oversight. Photo session timing is the single most common driver of timeline variance at receptions. Documentary coverage of the couple, bridal party, and family groups requires physical relocation, pose management, and light management that takes longer than guests inside the venue observe from their seats. A guest who has not coordinated 12 vendors across a 6-hour live event is not positioned to assess the organizational quality of someone who has. Deciding a wedding is poorly organized from your table is like deciding air traffic control is incompetent because your flight is 10 minutes late. 53, a guest who became aware that a professional wedding planner was involved in the event, suggested this was excessive, impersonal, and possibly a sign that the couple was incapable of managing their own affairs. The wedding planner standing nearby managed this feedback professionally, which is part of what the couple paid for. Wedding planning requires coordinating an average of 12 to 15 vendors across a 6 to 18-month planning window. The project management complexity of a single wedding exceeds what most individuals manage in any single professional undertaking in their lives. It involves contract negotiation, vendor communication, timeline construction, budget tracking, family coordination, vendor day of management, and real-time problem solving. It is a project. Projects benefit from project managers. Studies of wedding outcomes show that couples who use professional planners report significantly lower day of stress, fewer vendor conflicts, and higher overall satisfaction scores. The professional's value is measurable in the data. Budget management is a primary planner function, and experienced planners carry vendor relationships and negotiating leverage that routinely save couples more than the planner's fee through package optimization, discounts, and avoided mistakes. The planner pays for themselves. The wedding planning industry is a multi-billion-dollar professional service sector with formal training programs, certification bodies, and industry associations. It is a recognized profession with specific expertise developed across hundreds of events. A couple using a wedding planner is making the same decision as any organization using a project manager. Recognizing that professional expertise applied to a complex, high-stakes, time-sensitive deliverable produces better outcomes than improvisation. The planner's involvement is largely invisible to guests. Their presence means the event runs smoothly, problems are resolved before guests notice them, and the couple is free to be present in their own wedding rather than operational inside it. Criticizing a couple for hiring a wedding planner is like criticizing a patient for hiring a surgeon. 54, a guest observed the bride's chosen gown, determined it was too short, too colorful, or insufficiently formal, and delivered a retroactive dress code opinion as though the bride's most personal sartorial decision required external validation before it could be considered complete. The white wedding gown convention that the guest was likely measuring against traces primarily to Queen Victoria's 1840 wedding, when she chose white as a display of wealth and the financial ability to wear a garment only once. It was a fashion statement made by one monarch at one event. It was not a universal declaration, not a moral standard, and not a rule. Before the Victorian white gown convention, brides across Europe and America wore their finest dress in whatever color they owned. Blue was a historically common choice in medieval European tradition, symbolizing purity. The white gown is a recent culturally specific convention that has been dominant for approximately 180 years in one cultural context. Brides in red are traditional across large segments of South Asian, Chinese, and East Asian wedding culture, where red represents luck, prosperity, and joy. The white gown is not a universal standard, it is a Western fashion convention. Non-white, non-traditional wedding dresses have been a consistent feature of the couture and bridal fashion industry for decades. Very Wang built an entire segment of her brand around non-traditional bridal aesthetics. The bride's dress was selected after months of shopping, multiple fittings, and significant financial investment. By the time a guest sees it, the dress has been chosen, purchased, altered, steamed, and is currently being worn. The opinion window closed approximately 6 months before the wedding. Bridal fashion research shows that brides who choose non-traditional gowns report the highest personal satisfaction scores. Telling a bride her dress is not traditional enough is like telling someone their handwriting does not look enough like a printed font. 55. A guest assessed the groom's attire, perhaps a well-fitted suit rather than a tuxedo or a cultural garment worn with clear intention, and concluded that he had underdressed for his own wedding, as though a universal formality standard exists for groom attire and this particular groom had simply failed to meet it. Formal wedding attire for men varies enormously by culture, region, season, and venue. A linen suit at a coastal ceremony, a kilt at a Scottish celebration, a kurta at a South Asian event, and a tuxedo at a ballroom reception are all equally correct in their respective contexts. Correctness is contextual. The tuxedo itself is a relatively recent convention in Western wedding formality, popularized in the late 19th century as an alternative to white tie, which was the previous formal standard. Before the tuxedo was the informal option. Standards shift. Groom attire is coordinated with the bridal party aesthetic, the venue, and the overall design vision during planning. What a guest sees is the result of a deliberate, coordinated decision, not an oversight that slipped past everyone involved. The wedding industry has documented a sustained trend toward groom individualism in attire. Patterned suits, bold accessories, cultural garments, relaxed silhouettes, and non-traditional colors are all mainstream choices represented in major bridal publications and across professional wedding photography. These are not mistakes that made it to print. They are choices celebrated by the industry. A guest's formality expectations are calibrated to their own previous wedding attendance and personal cultural context. They do not constitute an objective standard applicable to another person's wedding in a different context, with different traditions and a different vision. The groom's comfort and confidence in his attire directly affect his presence and availability on the wedding day. Wearing what he actually wants is a legitimate and important priority. Telling a groom he is underdressed for his own wedding is like telling a chef they are cooking the wrong food in their own kitchen. 56. A guest who owns a dog requested that their pet be permitted to attend the reception, and upon being declined, treated the refusal as an act of inhospitality rather than what it actually was. A reasonable operational boundary applied consistently across all uninvited attendees, regardless of how many legs they have. Commercial event venues that serve food operate under county and state health department regulations that typically prohibit animals in food service areas. This is not the couple's preference expressed as policy. It is a regulatory requirement that governs the venue's operating license. The couple cannot override it for a single guest's convenience without potentially exposing the venue to a health code violation and themselves to liability. Venue pet policies are contract terms. A couple hosting an event at a venue that prohibits animals is legally bound by that prohibition. Their hands are not loosely open on this one. Wedding liability insurance, which many couples and venues carry, may exclude coverage for incidents involving animals not listed in the event plan. An uninvited pet creates a coverage gap at an event where the couple is already managing significant financial exposure. Guest allergies to pet dander are common. The presence of an animal at a food service event introduces allergens that other guests have not consented to and cannot easily avoid once they are in the space. The RSVP is the mechanism through which the couple manages guest count, seating, catering quantities, and every logistical element of the event. A pet that did not RSVP is an unplanned and unaccounted for variable. Dog-friendly weddings are a fully recognized and growing format. When couples want pets present, they plan for it intentionally in advance in coordination with the venue. The absence of that plan indicates a different choice was made. Asking to bring your uninvited dog to a wedding is like asking to bring an extra person to a sold-out reservation because you find their company pleasant. 57. A guest recognized the couple's first dance song as genre inconsistent with their internal model of appropriate wedding music and communicated embarrassment on the couple's behalf, as though the couple required a representative to feel things for them about their own choices at their own wedding. The first dance song is the most personally meaningful musical selection of the entire event. It is chosen because it means something specific: the song from a first date, a road trip, a moment of decision, a shared memory that exists in a private history the guest has no access to and was never intended to. Wedding music data consistently shows enormous diversity in first dance song selection across decades and genres. The most frequently played first dance songs span pop, country, jazz, rhythm and blues, classical, and categories that resist easy labeling. No single genre holds authority over the format. A song that strikes a guest as unconventional or surprising is frequently the song with the deepest emotional significance to the couple. The personal resonance is precisely why it was selected. The song is doing something in the room that the guest cannot see because they do not have the context. Wedding DJs report that the first dance songs they are most often asked not to judge, including hip-hop tracks, comedy songs, and video game themes, are reliably the ones with the most specific and meaningful personal stories attached to them. The emotional power of the first dance comes from the couple's connection to the music and to each other, their body language, their eye contact, their response to the song in the room. These are visible to every guest, regardless of whether they understand the choice. A guest who does not understand the song is simply not in possession of the story. Judging someone's first dance song is like reading one page of someone's private journal and deciding you understand their whole relationship. 58. A guest who contributed a generous wedding gift arrived at the reception with an implicit expectation that gift magnitude would translate into seating proximity to the couple, and filed a complaint upon discovering that table placement operated on entirely different criteria that had nothing to do with their contribution. Wedding gift etiquette, as established by every major authority on the subject, defines a gift as a voluntary expression of goodwill given without expectation of reciprocal benefit of any kind. Attaching conditions to a gift retroactively violates the fundamental nature of what a gift is. The moment a gift becomes a transaction, it stops being a gift. Seating chart construction is based on relational proximity, conversational compatibility, dietary logistics, and physical accessibility. Financial contribution is not a variable in the seating algorithm because including it would require the couple to rank guests by money, which is a practice so contrary to every hospitality norm and basic human dignity that no etiquette system in any culture has ever endorsed it. Tying seat placement to gift value would also require the couple to know each gift's value before the seating chart is finalized, which is not operationally possible since couples typically do not open gifts during the event and frequently do not know what was given until weeks after. The guest who gives generously and expects seating compensation has converted an act of generosity into a purchase, which changes what the gesture was. The social meaning of giving is destroyed by the expectation it creates. A close family member who gives a modest gift will always be seated closer to the couple than a distant acquaintance who gives generously because weddings are organized around relationships, not transactions. Expecting better seating for a large wedding gift is like tipping a restaurant generously and then asking to be moved to a better table because of it. 59. A guest whose phone was requested to remain in their pocket during the ceremony interpreted this as authoritarian overreach and spent time afterward framing the couple's request as a control issue, as though being asked not to photograph someone else's wedding while you attend it was a violation of something fundamental. The unplugged ceremony movement was not invented by controlling couples. It was initiated substantially by professional wedding photographers who documented across thousands of events that guest devices were appearing in hundreds of final images, obstructing established sightlines, and appearing in the background of moments the couple paid thousands of dollars to capture cleanly. The photographers asked couples to ask guests to put the phones away. Neurological research on attention and device use shows that photographing an experience actively reduces the photographer's own engagement with a memory of that experience. The guest who puts their phone away during a ceremony is not being deprived. They are being given back the moment. They will have access to professional photographs, typically far superior in quality and composition to any phone image taken from a guest seat once the couple shares them. The personal photo opportunity cost is zero. The request to be present during a ceremony is among the most reasonable possible hosting requests. It asks for nothing except attention. It costs the guests nothing except the option to half experience the event while documenting it for an audience that was not there. Unplugged ceremony requests are communicated in advance through the wedding website, the ceremony program, and verbally by the officiant. No guest is surprised at the door. No legal authority, etiquette standard, or social norm establishes a guest's right to photograph another person's private ceremony. The couple controls the environment of their event. Calling an unplugged ceremony request controlling is like calling a no-flash photography sign at a museum an attack on artistic freedom. 60. A guest with a strong personal preference for live music communicated disappointment that the couple had chosen a DJ, framing their individual taste as an objective quality assessment rather than what it was. A preference held by one person who did not plan, fund, or make any decisions about this event. Professional wedding DJs offer capabilities that live bands structurally cannot replicate. Perfect audio reproduction of original recordings, seamless transitions between any genre, access to any song in existence, and precise real-time volume control are genuine technical advantages that serve specific guest experience goals. These are not consolation prizes. They are features. Live wedding bands offer ambient energy, visual entertainment, and acoustic warmth that recorded music cannot replicate. They are also genuine advantages in the context where they thrive. Neither format is objectively superior to the other. The choice is aesthetic and contextual, which is how all aesthetic choices work. Price differentials between DJs and live bands are significant. A live band of 5 or more musicians typically costs 3 to 5 times the price of a professional DJ, a budget consideration the couple weighed during planning alongside every other financial decision. Venue acoustics affect live music quality in ways that make some spaces significantly better suited to amplified recorded music than to live acoustic performance. The couple may have made their entertainment decision partly based on how the venue performs, information they gathered during venue tours a year before the wedding. Guest dancing behavior research shows equivalent dance floor engagement between DJ and live band receptions when the entertainer is skilled. The determining variable is energy and song selection, not format. The couple interviewed, compared, and selected their entertainment after significant consideration. Telling a couple they should have hired a band instead of a DJ is like telling someone their perfectly prepared meal would have been better cooked on a different appliance. 61. A guest who attended a well-produced, visually cohesive, professionally documented wedding delivered the retrospective assessment that it felt too polished, too staged, and too commercial, apparently operating under the belief that professional quality is evidence of inauthenticity and that things done well must therefore be false. The aesthetic coherence a guest experiences as staged is the output of a florist, a photographer, a lighting designer, and a venue coordinator working from a shared creative brief across months of planning. It is professional craft executed by trained practitioners. That is what craft looks like when it succeeds. The couple's actual relationship, their actual vows, their actual emotional responses to each other in the room are present regardless of how well the event is designed around them. Professional production frames authenticity. It does not replace it. The frame does not change the content. A couple who cried during their vows in a beautifully lit room was not performing the cry for the lighting. They were crying. The wedding industry's professional standards have elevated significantly over the past 2 decades. What reads as staged to a guest accustomed to lower production values is the current standard of well-executed event design. The guest's reference point is older events. The industry moved. Guests who find professionally produced events less authentic than informal ones are frequently expressing a preference for their own comfort with lower production values, not an objective assessment of the couple's emotional reality. The distinction between authentic and staged at a wedding is a false binary. A couple who prepared, rehearsed, and professionally documented their commitment is not less sincere than one who did not. They are more organized. Organization is not performance. Calling a well-produced wedding stage is like calling a well-edited book fake because someone proofread it before it was published. 62. A guest with knowledge of a family estrangement used the wedding reception as an occasion to advocate loudly for the inclusion of the uninvited party, treating the couple's deliberate exclusion as an error requiring real-time correction rather than a considered decision deserving respect. Family estrangements that reach the level of wedding guest list exclusion have developed over years or decades. They involve complex relational histories, safety considerations, patterns of behavior, and dynamics that a peripheral guest observing from the outside cannot fully understand or accurately summarize over cocktails. The decision to exclude an estranged family member from a wedding involves weighing personal safety, emotional well-being, parental relationships, the couple's right to a peaceful celebration, and sometimes the advice of therapists who have been engaged with the situation for years. It is never made casually. Wedding planning professionals and family therapists consistently advise couples to prioritize their safety and emotional well-being over social pressure to include family members whose presence creates genuine harm or anxiety. This advice exists in the professional literature because the scenario is common and the stakes are real. The couple lives with the consequences of every guest list decision long after the wedding ends. A guest who advocates for the estranged party's inclusion bears none of those consequences. None. Their advocacy costs them nothing. The couple pays for whatever follows. A guest who raises the estrangement publicly during the reception is introducing a potentially destabilizing family conflict into the most emotionally significant day of the couple's lives, at a moment when they have zero capacity to manage it and no mechanism for resolving it. The right to determine who is present at a private event is a fundamental and unambiguous hosting authority. Lobbying for an estranged family member's inclusion at someone else's wedding is like arguing for a personnel decision at a company you do not work for. 63. A guest who attended a full wedding day spanning ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, toasts, dancing, and cake cutting issued an overall runtime complaint as though the event were an overlong film that needed tighter editing and the couple had failed to consult an audience test group before finalizing the program. A standard American wedding timeline runs approximately 5 to 7 hours from ceremony start to reception close. This duration is an industry standard. Venues price their packages around it, caterers staff around it, photographers quote around it, bands and DJs contract around it. Every professional who touched this event built their deliverable around a timeline the guest is now retroactively critiquing as excessive. Each segment of the reception, ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner service, toasts, first dances, parent dances, open dancing serves a distinct social function. None is redundant. Their sequence reflects decades of optimized event design developed across millions of events by people whose entire professional purpose is making large social gatherings work. Guests are under no social obligation to remain at a wedding reception for its full duration. Departing after dinner is a fully acceptable and widely practiced guest behavior. It requires only a brief and gracious farewell to the couple, a gesture that takes under 2 minutes and causes no disruption. The couple's investment in venue time, catering service, entertainment coverage, and every other contracted element is calculated around the full duration. Shortening the event creates contractual and financial complications the couple cannot absorb on the day. Research on wedding guest experience shows that the moments guests most frequently cite as memorable occur in the later portions of the reception during open dancing and end-of-night moments. Guests who leave early most commonly report wishing they had stayed. Complaining a wedding is too long is like complaining a theme park has too many attractions. You are never required to experience all of them. 64. The couple cut their wedding cake in a way the guest found insufficiently ceremonial, possibly involving a brief and mutually consented application of frosting that the guest determined was disrespectful, as though the manner in which two people interact with their own dessert at their own celebration requires external standards enforcement. The wedding cake cutting tradition has roots in Roman marriage ceremonies, where a grain cake was broken over the bride's head as a fertility symbol. It has never had a single correct form. It has evolved continuously across cultures and centuries, and no iteration of it carries canonical authority over any other. The smash or no smash question is a well-documented and widely discussed planning decision that couples make together deliberately and in advance. Couples who choose a playful frosting exchange have made a consensual, intentional, pre-discussed choice. It was not a surprise to either of them. The cake cutting is not a legally bound or etiquette-governed ceremony. It is a visual and photographic moment whose primary function is documentation and shared joy. Joyful photographs serve that function extremely well. Cake cutting songs, timing, and presentation level are entirely at the couple's discretion. No etiquette standard specifies the correct soundtrack, the correct degree of solemnity, or the correct ratio of playfulness to decorum for this moment. Research on couples who chose the cake smash shows that, when surveyed afterward, those couples overwhelmingly report finding it joyful in retrospect. The complaint about the smash most commonly originates from guests projecting preferences onto a moment that belonged to someone else. The cake cutting is a moment the couple shares with each other in front of their guests. Its success is measured by whether the couple found it meaningful or fun, neither of which requires the guest's approval. Filing a complaint about how a couple cut their own wedding cake is like reviewing how someone blew out their own birthday candles. 65. A guest who stayed until the very end of the reception discovered the couple had departed quietly without a grand exit involving sparklers, confetti, ribbon wands, or a choreographed send-off tunnel, and treated this absence as a final planning omission that undermined an otherwise complete evening. Grand exit traditions, including sparkler tunnels, confetti sends, and petal tosses, are optional photographic moments. They are not required closing ceremonies. They are not etiquette obligations. They are one possible way to end an event among many, and their absence represents a legitimate hosting choice rather than an incomplete evening. The grand exit photograph is primarily a professional documentation moment, a single image or short video sequence that requires coordinating all remaining guests into a specific formation at the end of the longest day of the couple's lives. Many venues have explicit restrictions on specific exit materials. Sparklers are prohibited in most indoor venues and during periods of elevated fire risk in many regions. Some popular exit formats are simply not available depending on where and when the wedding is held. Guests who remain for a grand exit are asked to wait in a specific physical configuration on command, a request that can feel obligatory for tired guests, guests with early travel the next morning, and guests managing children. The couple who has been on their feet for 12 hours and chooses to depart quietly after a full evening of genuine presence and engagement has completed every meaningful social obligation of the event. Their departure does not require performance. The grand exit tradition in its current popular form is less than 30 years old. Its absence does not constitute a violation of wedding tradition. It constitutes a preference for a different kind of ending. Complaining about the absence of a grand exit is like reviewing a genuinely excellent concert and noting in the critique that they did not do an encore. 66. A guest who walked into the venue, sat down without difficulty, moved freely through the cocktail hour, and navigated the reception without incident, nonetheless filed a retrospective accessibility critique on behalf of hypothetical guests with different needs, without apparent knowledge of whether those guests existed, whether they had communicated any concerns, or whether any accommodations had already been arranged. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires all commercial event venues to meet specific accessibility standards, including ramp access, accessible restrooms, clear pathways, and designated parking. Venues that operate legally are already meeting these requirements. The couple did not select a venue operating outside the law. Couples who have guests with specific accessibility needs receive that information from the guests themselves, almost universally through the RSVP process or direct communication during planning. The accommodation chain begins with the guest's communication, not with the couple's telepathy. Wedding venues that appear to have limited accessibility from the entrance frequently have accommodations that are not immediately visible to a first-time visitor. Private entrances, elevator access, reserved parking near specific doors, and staff-assisted pathways arranged through direct venue coordinator communication. A guest who raised no accessibility concern during the planning process and communicated no personal need has no basis for a post-event complaint about accessibility. The mechanism for communicating that need existed. It was available. It was not used. Retroactive accessibility advocacy on behalf of guests who attended the event and did not complain serves no functional purpose. The guests who were there managed the venue. The guests who were not there for other reasons. Filing an accessibility complaint on behalf of people who attended and did not object is like submitting a meal complaint for a dish you did not order that the table beside you finished without incident. 67, a guest who was present at the wedding, expressed irritation that the couple shared photographs and a wedding announcement on social media within days of the event, as though the couple's marriage requires a holding period before it can be discussed publicly by the people who just got married. Social media milestone sharing has no established etiquette window requiring a delay. There is no published standard, no authority, and no convention specifying how long a couple must wait before announcing their own marriage to their own networks. The marriage is a public legal event. The record is filed with the county clerk and becomes a public document accessible to anyone who requests it. The couple announcing a public legal event on their own social media profiles requires no permission from anyone and no timing protocol established by anyone. Early social media sharing serves genuine functions. Distant family members, elderly relatives who cannot travel, close friends who faced unavoidable conflicts, and international connections all receive news of the event in real time rather than weeks later through a mailed card. This is an inclusive gesture with real value to real people. A guest's irritation at a couple's post-wedding social media activity is a personal emotional response to content the guest can unfollow, mute, or scroll past without engagement. The solution is entirely within the guest's control and requires approximately 2 seconds to execute. Professional wedding photography turnarounds run 6 to 12 weeks. Early social sharing is done with phone photographs taken by guests and the couple themselves, not with professional images that bypass the photography contract. The couple is not circumventing their own documentation, they are sharing their joy in real time with people who love them. Policing when a couple can post about their own wedding is like telling someone they cannot tell their friends about a promotion until you have had adequate time to process the information. 68, a guest who received a wedding invitation became an informal advocate for expanding the guest list to include mutual friends who were not invited and lobbied the couple to reconsider inclusions that had already been finalized through weeks of deliberate and frequently painful prioritization that the guest was not part of and did not witness. Wedding guest lists go through 3 to 5 complete revisions as couples balance family obligations, friendship groups, budget constraints, and venue capacity. By the time invitations are sent, the list reflects the output of a negotiation process that costs the couple real emotional labor and real relational difficulty. The invitations represent the end of that process, not the beginning of a new consultation. Every addition to a wedding guest list has a direct financial cost. At an average per guest cost of $85 to $290, adding 5 uninvited guests represents $425 to $1,450 of unbudgeted spending that the couple cannot absorb on request. The decision of who attends a private event is an unambiguous hosting authority that belongs to the couple and no one else. No etiquette standard, social norm, or relationship entitles a guest to expand the list on behalf of people who were not invited and did not ask. Guest list negotiations are consistently identified by wedding planners as the single most emotionally difficult component of the planning process. Couples frequently make painful exclusions of people they genuinely care about to stay within capacity. The guest advocating for uninvited friends is asking the couple to reopen a closed and painful decision-making process for the benefit of people who are not present. The couple's list decisions are made. The invitations are sent. Lobbying to expand a wedding guest list after invitations are delivered is like asking a full airplane to add seats because you know someone who also wants to go. 69, a couple who departed for their honeymoon immediately following the wedding, was criticized by a guest for missing the post-wedding brunch, an optional supplementary gathering typically hosted by family for out-of-town guests, as though a morning social event outranks the first days of a marriage in the hierarchy of post-wedding priorities. Post-wedding brunches are hosted by family members as a courtesy to guests who need a gathering point before traveling home. They are supplementary events. They exist to serve guests who remain in town after the wedding, not to extend the couple's hosting obligations into the following morning. The couple is not the host of the post-wedding brunch. The couple is typically an invited guest at an event thrown for other people. The couple's honeymoon travel is booked months in advance with non-refundable flight and accommodation components. Departure timing is a financial commitment with real monetary consequences for changes made on short notice. It is not a preference the couple is casually prioritizing over brunch. Etiquette authorities, including Emily Post, explicitly state that couple attendance at post-wedding supplementary events is optional and that honeymoon plans take complete precedence over all secondary gatherings. This is not ambiguous. The couple has spent the preceding 12 to 18 months in intensive planning and the preceding day in the most socially and emotionally demanding performance of their lives. The honeymoon is the first opportunity for privacy, rest, and genuine togetherness without a vendor timeline. Post-wedding brunches that the couple attends are a gracious bonus. Their absence does not diminish the brunch or signal disrespect to anyone. A guest who built an expectation around the couple's brunch attendance without a confirmed commitment built that expectation without a foundation. Expecting the couple to skip their honeymoon for brunch is like expecting the headliner to stay for the after party because you came all the way out. 70. A guest who witnessed a minor wedding day complication, perhaps the cake arriving behind schedule or a brief logistical discussion between the couple, delivered the retrospective diagnosis that these observations pointed toward marital difficulty, as though a 6-hour event is a diagnostic instrument capable of predicting the trajectory of a decades-long relationship. Longitudinal marriage research finds no correlation between wedding day complications and marital satisfaction or longevity. Marriages succeed or fail based on communication patterns, conflict resolution skills, shared values, financial compatibility, and sustained mutual investment. None of these variables are observable at a wedding. None of them produce detectable signals during a reception. Wedding day stress is a universally documented experience. Surveys of married couples consistently show that nearly all of them experience some form of complication on their wedding day, which means complication is the statistical norm, not a warning signal that distinguishes troubled marriages from healthy ones. The superstition that wedding day events predict marital outcomes has no empirical basis in any research literature. It is magical thinking applied to a human relationship, which is a relationship, not a weather system with observable fronts. Couples who experience and navigate a wedding day complication together are frequently demonstrating exactly the communication and partnership behaviors that relationship researchers identify as predictors of long-term success. The complication is not evidence of a problem. It is an opportunity that the couple either manages together or does not. How they handle it is more informative than the fact that it happened. The Emory University marriage study found that wedding spending, a more tangible and measurable variable than day of tone, showed no positive correlation with marriage length. External event quality does not predict internal relational health. Predicting a marriage's outcome from a wedding day complication is like predicting a career's failure because someone stumbled slightly during their interview. 71. A guest who attended a fully catered, professionally staffed, expensively produced wedding departed with the assessment that the couple had not sufficiently demonstrated gratitude for the guest's presence As though hosting an event for 150 people at significant personal financial cost does not itself constitute an expression of profound generosity toward every person in the room. The average wedding represents a financial investment of approximately $30,000 spent entirely on creating an experience for the people who attend it. The catering, the venue, the music, the florals, the open bar, and every other element of the event are resources directed completely at guest enjoyment. The couple is not benefiting from the catering financially, they are providing it. Wedding hospitality etiquette positions the host as the provider and the guest as the recipient. A guest who attends receives food, drink, professional entertainment, and a ceremony at zero personal cost. The conventional gratitude flow in that exchange runs from guest to host, not the other way around. The couple on their wedding day is managing vendor coordination, family expectations, physical and emotional exhaustion accumulated across a 12-hour production, photography obligations, ceremonial performance, and interpersonal navigation simultaneously. Their available bandwidth for extended individual gratitude expression toward each guest is genuinely and mathematically limited by those competing demands. Formal wedding thank you protocols exist precisely because in-person expression during the event is insufficient. The handwritten thank you note system is the designated vehicle for post-event acknowledgement, and it has a 3-month window for a reason. Research on host-guest dynamics identifies the expectation of emotional labor from hosts during large-scale events they are providing for free as a clearly documented entitlement response. The couple who funded the event, negotiated every contract, and stood on their feet for 12 hours to give you this experience is not the party from whom more gratitude should be demanded. Now answer this honestly. Which one of these was you? Drop it in the comments and defend it if you dare. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.